Welcome in to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Derek Piper here, guest hosting for Jeremy Warner, who has made his way, I think he's arrived by now, to Kansas City. A huge Thanksgiving Day clash between the Illini and the Hogs of Arkansas. We'll dive into all of that. We're excited to be joined by our guy, Mike LaTulip, former Illini, of course, regular here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast, and a stock-rising national media guy, too. So what's up, Mike? Happy Feast Week to you.
Yeah, you too, man. It's great that Jeremy's taking the family out to KC. There's no other place I'd rather be for Thanksgiving. We're hosting this year, actually, my wife and I, first time. So there's been it's part of the reason why this recording got pushed back a little bit, because I'm trying to figure out ducks in a row, do the whole thing. We got the in-laws coming in town, so it's got to be on point.
Ducks in a row. Are you smoking duck? What you got rolling for the?
No, it's actually a small turkey and a small ham. We're not big on leftovers, so we're trying to thread the needle given the amount of people coming and the food we're trying to dish out.
There you go. Well, we'll get right into it. Illinois didn't play with their food the last two games. When you look at Little Rock and also Maryland Eastern Shore, Eastern Shore is a brutal D1 team. They got smacked by Arkansas on Monday night as well. But Mike, I looked at Little Rock. I went back and watched the game against Arkansas. They finished within 12 points. Look at their KenPom analytics, the fact that they were picked to win the OVC. Yes, a low major league, but I thought that they maybe could put up a fight against the Illini. I think it said a lot about Illinois that they didn't. Exploded out to a 33-13 lead and cruised on from there. 92-34, the fewest points allowed by a Brad Underwood team during his tenure. We'll talk about the defense, but just overall, what were the things that stood out here recently, last two games, about the Illini to you?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with the Little Rock game. I also went back, watched the Arkansas game, and then as you go back to each team that they've played, no team they've played has turned it over less than 14 times. Like, their calling card was turning you over, contesting shots at the rim, blocking shots, and then, they were definitely vulnerable on the glass. So going into that game, I think I maybe talked about it on the radio, but I said, hey, if Illinois keeps their turnovers under 10 and gets to 20 or more offensive rebounds, they're going to run this team out of the gym. And they had 19 offensive rebounds and they had 8 turnovers, which is just super impressive. I think it speaks to, what they're finding with these personnel groupings and rotations. I always talk about predictability within your role and what you're doing on a nightly basis. And the more predictability you have, the less turnovers there typically are. And I think each guy in their own way is kind of finding themselves. I thought KJ was tremendous, just his assertiveness. Started with the Alabama game. That Oakland game, I was a little bit worried that was going to be kind of who he is, even though we've seen in the past that he can score at a high level. Kylan turns over 5 times against EIU, has had 3 turnovers since, in the next 5 games or whatever it is. So these guys have just steadily climbed. And I think that's what we thought was going to happen with this team. It wasn't going to be a finished product in November or even in December, most likely not even in January. So continue to stack these days, continue to figure out what groupings make sense, figure out what our identity is going to be on offense and defense, and then you come up for air in February and March and see where the chips lie.
Mike, obviously a lot to break down there, but to go to the defense, to go from an Alabama game where you get up 100, Mark Sears not part of that effort, but which obviously Kylan deserves credit for in a positive way, but Alabama still had no problem putting up triple digits. Then to go to these games, different level opponent, but to see 40 given up against Eastern Shore, 34 against Little Rock, it's far too early to take too much from KenPom analytics, but to see Illinois, I think, is it 16th right now nationally in defensive efficiency rating? Like, where do you land early in this season on the defense, kind of the sample size that we've been given, both the very positive, but also a little bit of alarm bells against Bama. And then I know it wasn't a game that counted, but 91 against Ole Miss.
They're going to be a better defensive team than last year. And it's 2 particular spots where that's going to be, evident. And that's Kylan Boswell on the ball and what he does for their defense, getting through screens, contesting shots. I've talked about the ball pressure over the years, and when you pressure the ball and how that throws off the other team's offense and flow, because they want to start their offense at 23 feet, but you're making them start at 28. And that throws off timing. That allows you to recover more easily. And then the interior defense. I think, Tomislav isn't the most mobile guy in the world, but he is 7'1", and he does have really good instincts and anticipation when you want to make passes. When he's in drop coverage, he's understands, hey, this is a bounce pass. It's maybe something that's going to go over my head. He's not a great vertical leaper, but he gets leverage and he gets positioning to be able to get those rebounds or box out, put a body on someone, and clear the glass. Because all those things that factor into your defensive efficiency is also not giving up offensive rebounds and allowing teams to get second chance opportunities. That was what I saw last night. I'll honestly throw out the Eastern Shore game. I do think that's no disrespect to Maryland Eastern Shore, as I slightly disrespect them. That's the worst Division I team I've seen this year. So, I was honestly kind of worried because that should have been more of a blowout in that first half. They eventually did blow it out, but seeing what they did to Little Rock last night, and all of it to me started on the defensive end. I mean, just the activity. I mean, I thought it popped off the screen. And when you look at guys like Trey White, Ben Humrickhouse, like these other guys that are on the wing, use your positional size. Use it. Play with some desperation. And I thought they did that, and they weren't on their heels like they were against Alabama. Different athletes for sure, but those are all habits that you can build on, and they're trending in the right direction, and they're trending, at the right time and going in the right direction ahead of this, Arkansas matchup.
Mike, to go to the offensive side, I know in listening to you recently, you've talked about playing inside out, getting feet to the paint or in that range. And then if you are going to make that kick out pass to three, that creates more in rhythm quality shots than just maybe swinging around the perimeter, not probing that defense. Seemed like that was a real point of emphasis last night. A lot of downhill action. I know that Brad said afterwards that it was a Little Rock team that's fouled a lot. So you're really kind of putting them in position to maybe put your guys on the line by getting it inside. But that was something I was really encouraged by. It seemed like both KJ and Kylan breaking that first level of the defense and then be able to play off of that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it was super encouraging. I think it was maybe 10 minutes into the game, they had taken 5 threes. And it wasn't because Little Rock was shutting off their water. It was because there was a emphasis to get the ball into the paint. And if you get the ball in the paint, that doesn't mean just get it in there to throw it back out. Like you said, it's get it in there to freaking score. Get it in there to get it up on the rim. Use your positional size like I talked about defensively. Same thing offensively. And it's so important because I thought in the Alabama game, when Kasper Siakashonas isn't on the floor, that offense stalled out in the first half, big time. And everything was east-west. Nobody was getting downhill until it felt like, I don't know, in the locker room or before the game, Kylan Boswell was like looked in the mirror or something. I was like, oh, wait, I'm built like a running back. Let me get downhill. I'm quick enough. I can, kind of ward guys off with my body. And he's been doing that. And that is like a real development for this team. Him getting downhill, and, he's a better free throw shooter than his numbers indicate right now, but he's going to get there more. And when you get there more, you're in a rhythm, more of a rhythm to make more free throws. And so that's massive, because now you got 2 guys in that backcourt that can put pressure on the rim. Yeah, and then you have a guy like Will Riley who can come in and hit shots from any place on the court. Like that is some serious encouragement, right? Because I don't know. I mean, I just felt like the first few games of the year, it's like, let's just take threes, and your percentages aren't going to reflect good percentages because they're not quality ones. You're just getting them up and playing the volume game. And so now I feel like they're taking more of like a pragmatic approach to getting the right ones. And then, if we don't get them great, but we better be getting shots at the rim. Kasper Siakashonas, 76%, 75% at the rim, or really inside the arc this year, 10 for 14. Tomislav, over 70% inside the arc this year. Kylan can obviously improve on that, but that's a guy that's been in like the 40-ish, low 40s from 2, below 40 last year. He's 53%. So that's super encouraging. And I think it's only going to help this team get better. And Trey White, kind of falls under that same umbrella to a degree. So I want to see them continue to build on that. And just because the defensive intensity and you play a high major opponent next, that doesn't mean like, hey, because it's a little more difficult, let's just stop trying. Like, continue to put that pressure on the defense, get them on their heels, get them in foul trouble, shoot free throws. There's good free throw shooters on this team. So yeah, I mean, it's really good to see, because we're 6 games in now, and you can see real improvement.
Between the duo of Kasparis and Kylan, 12 assists, only 3 turnovers. We saw KJ be the leading scorer with 21 points. Kylan, 7 assists, 1 turnover. Only took 1 shot. It was an air ball 3 early, but he really facilitated. I think maybe some people might forget, hey, this is a guy that had 10 assists in a game last year against Wisconsin playing alongside Caleb Love. So what do you think about with 5 games under their belt now of being able to blend together and figure this thing out in the backcourt where, Kylan was kind of honest early, like, this is a new system. I'm in a new role. I'm kind of figuring it out on the fly. Do you feel like there's more synergy between those two? How do you think that's coming together between them?
Yeah, I mean, I read body language, and I love the dynamic between those two because there's not like a your turn, my turn. There's not this like push pull of, man, Kasparis just went, downhill 3 possessions in a row. Now I got to go. Now I got to shoot my pull-up 3. I mean, I think Kylan's been so patient because he's been around in college basketball, right? It's, the importance early in the season isn't like all about you getting off to a good shooting start or you getting off to, a hot start offensively. It's about what the team's doing. And I think I truly see that from Kylan. He's seeing bigger picture with all this because he knows that in order for this team to achieve what they want to achieve, Kasparis Giaconos has to be really good. And him being really good only helps Kylan Boswell. I think Kylan's smart enough to understand that, and that's what you're seeing. So to be able to, let's say KJ has foul trouble, to be able to have a guy like Kylan be like, hey, here's our secondary ball handler, here's our, call it like backup point guard, is a pretty good luxury to have. Because he made some passes last night in the first half where he came off to the kind of the, from the top of the key off with his left hand, one hand skip pass to the opposite corner for a 3. Like that's stuff that a small percentage of college basketball players like can make that play. Not many can. And you got multiple guys who can make reads like that. And he's just been so much more, I don't know, like conservative isn't even the word because I don't even think he's being conservative. He's being more confident with his ball handling abilities. And it's led to, the Ole Miss game and the EIU game was turnovers and really for the whole team. And now you have the guys that you have the ball in their hands the most, and they're really turning it over just not much. And that's what you want to see. And then for it's good to see Kasparis get going from 3 last night because the one thing that you want to see with him is, you want teams to have to feel like they can go over his screens. And if they go over his screens, that puts that drop defender, that second defender in more of a bind to where now the tag defenders on the backside are in more of a bind because Tomislav is either rolling to the rim or he's picking and popping and they got to return back to him. If you're a guy that's shooting mid-20s, teams are going to start going under. And now that big doesn't even have to commit as much and can be level with Tommy on the roll or just, flow back out to Tommy on the pop. So that's why you got to be good from the outside. I think Kylan still warrants that respect just based off his career shooting numbers. And that's only going to continue as he continues to like trend upward with his shooting ability. So I know that was a lot, but it's been really cool to see those two gel. And they come from 2 completely different places, now here in a new system and seemingly making things work early on.
Statistically, Mike, that was as complete a performance as we've seen from KJ to this point. 21 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, only had 2 turnovers ultimately. He got a technical foul as well, his first one of his career. I've never seen an Illini bench be more proud of a technical foul. I don't think it was anything egregious, kind of just knew that he was owning Little Rock last night and had a little bit of emotion to show after a bucket at the rim. But do you take anything from maybe a guy? I'm not saying he's coming out of his shell. He's been great really since he's shown up here, but to show kind of that toughness dog to him a little bit. And it seemed like Little Rock took a couple of shots at him afterwards, and including a flagrant foul late, but he never buckled.
You want your point guard to have some shit to him. You just do. I mean, Kylan has that. Kylan has some shit to him. And now it's like you get both backcourt guys with that mentality. And I think part of it's seeing the ball go through the basket. I mean, KJ's really come on in that department the last couple games. And then my take on it is somebody said something to him. And then that kind of awakened the beast a little bit. So it's like if Malcolm when he was my teammate. Like if he got a technical, we would be doing the same thing and jumping up and clapping because it wasn't necessarily in his nature. Malcolm was super competitive, but more like on the quiet reserve side, like quiet confidence type guy. So to see that come out of him is awesome because they're going to need that when you get into like when you get into Big Ten play, and you're going to have guys on the other side talking crap, telling you, hey, Lithuanian, this, like, you're soft, European, all that stuff. Like he has a chance to kind of flip that narrative, and he doesn't play soft at all. Like he really gets after you defensively. That's an area I think I've been really impressed with KJ, his ability to guard. I was worried watching the film this offseason, like, how's that going to translate? But when you see a guy at 6'5", 6'6", slide his feet like that, anticipate things like that, rebound like that, that's a real asset. So it's awesome to see. And I think the Oakland game was so good for him because it was a great reminder of, hey, you can't be a pedestrian. Like you can't be a bystander in this. We all feed off of you, and you are so talented offensively. He showed that last night. He showed the previous few games that you can be a go-to guy. He can be a go-to guy. He can be this team's leading scorer. So, I mean, Will Riley might make that difficult, but he's a guy that on a given night can give you 20 like he did last night. I was talking to Jeremy a few podcasts ago. I said, I think it was after the Oakland game. I was like, he's gonna have 20 in one of these next few games because I guarantee you the light's gonna go off and he's gonna say, man, what am I doing? I'm a guy that just dropped 40 in like U18 FIBA stuff. Like I gotta go. I got like this. The time is now, and so that was really great to see. But yeah, the Tech. I knew it's the second he started flexing and standing over the guy. Essentially, I was like, he's gonna get one there. But I love that Brad didn't sub him out, didn't like give him a talking to. Brad loves that stuff.
Yeah, he definitely does. He said he wanted in the post game. He said, "I want to give him a hug." So that would be the only thing he probably subbed him out.
I hope he did.
Yeah, he probably should have. So we talked about the backcourt duo. How about in the front court? Brad has lived up to the word of, hey, I want to see more of Tommy and Merez together. We've gotten that for one stint against Eastern Shore, a couple last night against Little Rock. We saw a moment of Tommy, a high-low pass inside to Merez. I believe he got fouled in that game. Both guys really productive here recently. Tommy against Little Rock, 16 points, 11 rebounds. Merez flirted with another double-double, just a couple points shy. But, man, the rebounding rate on KenPom is going to be as high as anybody in the Big Ten, I would think, this year, if that continues to trend up. But what did you think of the minutes that you saw those two play together here on the front end of those guys feeling each other out on the court together?
Yeah, I wondered if this was going to happen, right? Because Tommy's so skilled that sliding him to the floor isn't that big of a deal. And Merez is just continuing to prove, like, I kind of need to be on the floor. His rebounding and his defense, I mean, the big reason they came back in that Alabama game was with Merez on the floor and his activity and erasing shots and clearing the defensive glass. And if you're Brad Underwood, you're sitting there, you're like, we got to find a way to utilize this. But Tommy's been so good too that you're like, we can't do this whole platoon thing either. So it's a good option to have. I don't think there's going to be any point in the season where you're like, hey, this is our go-to lineup. But when you play Indiana, when you play Maryland, when you play some of these teams that play these tandem bigs, having that as an option is huge. And then you got to also make the decision of like, okay, well, do we want to go big to combat these other bigs in the league, or do we want to then go small to, get more speed out there? I think this team at least has those options, which is great. A lot of teams don't have that type of optionality. But I do wonder too, I mean, Tomislav's lived up to the billing without question. I mean, he's a top 3 big man in the Big Ten. Like, I don't think that's controversial to say at all. I think he's been that good. I mean, you see his skill, the way he gets out of his roles, pick and pop. I mean, the percentages don't reflect it. I think that'll course correct a little bit. But man, I wonder if we're going to get to the point where he's commanding double teams. And if they start throwing it into him, because if they throw it into him and he's getting double teams, now I actually think there's more of an avenue to have Merez out there to be kind of like a Trey Kaufman-Renn, where it's like, hey, the low tag man that isn't trapping, you're the one that has to box me out, right? Or I'm getting a free run to the basket because they committed too many guys over to Tommy. Or they start doubling Tomislav, and now it's, hey, let's put Ben at the 4. And when we throw out of it, and if Northwestern's going to trap from the 4, then we're going to make Ben the passer. Because now you got to make the decision to come off of me, a shooter, to go trap. And if you do that, Tomislav's just going to hot potato it right back out for a 3. So you can see where they can put these different teams in a bind. And that's credit to Merez to allow them the opportunity to even have that option. So it's a good lesson, I think, for kids playing basketball. You don't have to be the guy that shoots every time. You don't have to be the guy that dribbles every time. Rebound, defend, and play your ass off and be active. And you know what's going to happen? You're likely going to find yourself on the floor. And that's what Merez is doing.
No doubt. Before we move on to Arkansas, I did want to give, I know you mentioned him already, Trey White, a little bit of a shout out, 16 points, 8 rebounds against Little Rock, 19 boards over the last 2 games. Yes, again, lower competition, but the activity's been there. And I think defensively, from what I saw, I haven't watched the game back, but it did seem like he had more engagement and intensity defensively than obviously had some lapses there against Bama. So how important is he as you go into a big chunk of high major games in your schedule, just as this thing starts to maybe level out for him?
Yeah, he's a great piece to have. I'll be curious to see Will Riley's going to play starters minutes. So who that eats into is going to be the question. They'll balance it out, I think, in other areas between probably Ben and Trey. But yeah, I mean, I think Trey could probably still simplify his game a little bit. I don't think he needs to be a guy that needs to pound the air out of the rock. There's a number of guys on this team that can. I mean, if a guy long closeout runs you off the line, great. Yeah. Get downhill, put pressure on the rim. This team needs more of that. But he's a guy that I just think with his activity, rebounding the basketball, I mean, he can be like an 8 to 10 point per game guy just off of that alone. And that's, frankly, to me, that's all he needs to be for this team. Where he got into trouble against Alabama was like, okay, what should have been maybe 3 dribbles is now 7. And now you're kind of getting taken out of things. Guys are leveling you off. He needs to be a really good rebounder. He needs to be a really good defender. And I think he needs to continue what he's doing as a cutter. I think that's one thing too. Like when Kasparis gets downhill down that slot, kind of down the lane line for like a right-handed layup, having a guy in Trey that can cut from the opposite baseline. He's done it a few times where they call it like a 45 cut from the opposite wing down into the paint. He got, I think, 2 layups off of that last night. That's where he's got to live. He's got to kind of live in that, cutter, mover, rebounder area. I don't think he's not necessarily a guy where you're like, hey, he's an action guy. We want him to be in actions and we want him, coming off and dictating. I think it's not like a weakness of his. There's just other strengths of his that I think can be accentuated if he focuses on those things.
All right, I want to take a minute to tell you about Home Field Apparel because they are the premium collegiate apparel brand and they're based in nearby Indianapolis. Home Field sent me a few shirts, and what I love about them is, of course, they have incredibly comfortable, well-fitting shirts, but they also have officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. And they have more than 180 plus available colleges, including, yes, your Illinois Fighting Illini. They have great gear for the upcoming football season, so for the warm weather games, check out their Script Illini t-shirt, the Orange Ringer tee, the vintage Oski Wawa helmet, or for the fall chillier games, check out the Script Illini hoodie, the Flying Illini hoodie, the Flying Illini quarter zip, and if they're still available, you might want to check out homefieldapparel.com for this. Check out their Script Bomber jacket. It is awesome. Also, don't miss their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign. So Homefield is giving away these special football boxes, and these platinum VIP boxes include 3 never-before-seen items from your school that are not available anywhere else. They're curated so fans have new gear to wear all season long, suitable for all weather conditions. And these platinum boxes also include other exclusive items, including a new hat or ringer, a VIP koozie, and a 2024 Platinum Pass, which guarantees 20% off and early access to your school's football releases through the 2024 season. The football boxes are available on August 9th, so these will sell out quick, so go check them out. Go to homefieldapparel.com to check out their great selection of Illini gear and use code Illini24, that's all capitals, Illini24 for 15% off. That's Illini24 for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com.
With that win last night, Illinois now 5-1. They're 21st on KenPom. You look at Arkansas, they're 5-1, 38th on KenPom. Anybody keeping score at home? Georgetown's 111th on KenPom. Anybody wondering about that or thinking, can we do
something
that
happen?
Yeah, I think so. We didn't do a pod after Saturday's game. Werner and Wagner were out in Piscataway. We haven't had you on since then. Can we talk about the Ed Cooley thing a little bit?
Yeah, we can.
What'd you make of it? Obviously, Jaden was committed to Providence. Ed Cooley, the head coach there. I think from what I'd heard, Chester Frazier, very influential in getting him and his dad to want to open that thing up. He lands at Illinois. The freshman season was productive and had some real high points. At Iowa was one that I still remember as maybe a potential arrival moment, but some clashes with Brad Underwood, some people around his circle that weren't too happy, and he moves on. So, that was a little bit surprising to make that comment, especially where Georgetown is as a program, especially where Illinois is. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I respect for Ed Cooley. I mean, he's done some things, I guess, in his coaching career, but he was talking out of his ass at the podium. Jaden got as much opportunity as you could possibly imagine as, a true freshman. I mean, he was pretty much given the keys as like a starting point guard for an NCAA tournament team. And I was at that Northwestern game. You know what game I'm talking about, where,
Yep.
Hey, team's huddling up and you're still sitting on the bench, not getting in the huddle. So to call it like a bullshit school and say, I don't know. I think it was unnecessary. I mean, you would think that after a full year has passed, I mean, he spent a whole year at Georgetown. He's now into his second season there. How is that coming up? And the context that he brought it up too was like, I saw this development in him. I mean, we saw it too. I mean, like that Iowa game you talked about, I talked to Jeremy after we did a film. His defense was outstanding in that game. The issue was like the consistency. And it's like, then you have play Northwestern at home. You go under Boo Booey's dribble handoffs 5 times in a row, and he hits 5 threes.
Yeah.
So and it's freshman stuff. And that's nothing against Jaden Epps. That's like what freshmen go through. But I think people get this idea, and people, when you have people close to you that are trying to influence you, they have some sort of idea of how things should be when there's just like a natural flow to how you develop as a player. And I thought this staff and Underwood gave him every opportunity to succeed. I thought he was successful in a lot of areas his freshman year. I mean, for a freshman, and he decided to go elsewhere. And he's playing on a really bad team, putting up numbers. And that's that. I mean, I just like the one thing I will say is there were a lot of people that were on Illinois' side. It felt like nationally, because I think everybody, even outside of Illinois fans, are like, what the hell? Like, why? Why make that? Yeah, why say that? I don't know.
I guess one reason to say it is so that people talk about Georgetown basketball, which otherwise you're probably not giving them.
I don't think you want them to talk about Georgetown.
Yeah.
I think Ed Cooley's better off just kind of having people be like, oh shit, yeah, Ed Cooley is the head coach there. I forgot about that. Not like, oh, Ed Cooley's let me check the
It led me to digging into the resume, and it's like, hey, Epps and Cooley together 2-23 against high major teams. Ooh. One additional note, Brad's told people post Jaden leaving, like, I maybe should have kicked him off the team when he decided not to go back into that game. Obviously, it played out anyway that he leaves. But Brad respected the heck out of who Jaden could be as a player. He said many times, I'm the biggest Jaden Epps fans there is, but not to dwell on that. They're doing just fine at point guard, by the way. I don't think they're missing.
They're good
in that. So, yeah,
it
was interesting.
Speaking, it was definitely it was definitely interesting, and I mean, throwing the barbs. I don't know. I mean, and the weird part was that he acknowledged that the national media would run with it.
Yeah.
And then he apologized for it and said it was like a misunderstanding. So that didn't make any sense to me. Like, if you're going to say it, stand on it and say it. And then that's that. But that clearly wasn't the case.
Apparently not. And I don't think they want to see Illinois as far as the matchup goes and to settle it on the court or anything like that.
I love seeing like Mac McClung highlights from Georgetown playing Illinois like in 2018 or whatever that was. That was good.
Like those still apply. Speaking of interesting, Illinois and Arkansas, plenty of storylines. You got Cal against Orlando Antigua. You got the Avicic twins doing battle against each other. Big T against Big Z. And just what should be a really fun matchup there in Kansas City on Thanksgiving Day. Right after, I don't know if Lions-Bears will be any fun. As a Bears fan, we keep finding ways to lose. But that game will be on afterwards. What's your initial – we'll dive into a little bit in terms of the matchup and whatnot. But initial thoughts on the challenge that's on Illinois' hands and this matchup that will take place on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, I mean, I think Illinois is going to be favored in this game, if I were to guess. So I don't think it'll be like an underdog situation. And I think right now, I think Illinois is the better team. Like, I think Arkansas still has a lot of role allocation to figure out, and I think you can take advantage of that. I think, I'll be curious to see what, who gets the Kylan Boswell matchup, right? Do you put him on Boogie Flan? Do you put him on Nelly Davis? I mean, like, who do you view as the head of the snake? Because I don't think they have one right now. So it'll be interesting to see if they move Kylan around, or if they want to just eliminate one guy and say, hey, beat us without this guy out there, or without this guy impacting the game. That's like the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing is, they played Baylor, and Baylor zoned them and did kind of the thing Illinois was doing last year, where you play the first 15 seconds of the possession in zone, and then you go back to man. And Cal was like, hey, we didn't know they were going to zone. So that was, I don't expect Illinois to do that. They're going to play man, because I think they want that. They want Kylan to be matched up with whoever they view as that guy for Arkansas. But this is a team that has defended well this year. They've been really solid on that end. So you're going to have to work offensively. You don't want to overcomplicate things, but you definitely want to be sure with the basketball. You don't want to get like this team when they got back in the game against Baylor was when they were getting out in transition, and they were running and forcing turnovers and finding easier baskets. They are not as good in the half court. So if you take care of the ball, finish possessions with a jump shot, finish possessions at the free throw line, go back and set your half court defense, I think you're going to like where you end up. But this is a talented team. I mean, like Tomislav's brother is shooting like 55% from three right now at 7'2". Boogie Flan and Nelly Davis have been good. Thiero has been really good as well. I mean, he's been their best player probably to this point. Does he get the Kylan matchup? Maybe not. You maybe have like a little bit too much size. So if that's the case, who do you put on him? Right? Is that Trey White? Probably, right? You'd think. Or maybe they do say screw it, let's put Kylan on him. So I'll be interested to see kind of how they manage that. And if you can go and get this win, I don't think Arkansas is like as probably heavily respected. No one's going to be like, oh my God, they knocked off Arkansas, but it's at least a step in the right direction. And it's a game that I think Illinois should win. I think they'll be favored. I think they should win if they take care of business.
Let's tackle this real quick, Mike. I've been thinking about this as far as the marquee non-conference games. Yeah, like similar to 2 years ago when they played UCLA, when they played Texas, it wouldn't resonate quite like those victories, obviously. Do they need one of these against the SEC? Or obviously you lose Bama. You've got this one. You got the one against Tennessee at home. Not to say that you'd be like a bubble team if you didn't get it, but you don't really want to strike out on those three. I guess you could throw the February game against Duke in there as another marquee non-conference game. I would imagine you really don't want to be in a situation where you're 0 for 4 in those. Thinking about seeding, thinking about pathways, if you do hit your ceiling as a team. Not to say you couldn't pull an upset depending on where you land in the bracket, but part of getting where you should go is having a nice path, right? And as far as a seed and whatnot. So maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe I'm way ahead of my skis here in late November. But what do you think about that, needing one of those or not, as far as this one and maybe at home against Tennessee?
Yeah, I think it's breaking it up into, you remember last year where they went on that, they played Western Illinois, and then they went on that stretch of, hey, we're going to Rutgers, FAU at the Garden, at Tennessee. And it felt like at that time it was like 2-1. Like 3-0 would great. I mean, that's 2 road wins. That would be best case scenario. But 2-1 feels like, hey, this, like, can you split these games? Right? I think beating Arkansas, I think they should beat Arkansas. And then you got Tennessee coming into your building. And I think Tennessee is going to be favored in their building. And then that place is going to be rocking. 2-0. Like, if you can win these 2 games, that's going to set you up nicely. And you're going to have some tests. You're going to have some tests in between that as well. Like, you're going to see, how do we fare against Northwestern when they trap like crazy? How do we fare against Wisconsin with their guard play and their wing play and the way John Tanji has it cooking right now? Like, you're going to learn in between those 2 games for sure. But like anything else, you want to try to do your work early, right? You want to try to get this win against Arkansas, take care of business in Big Ten play. And then can you be 3-0 in this stretch heading into that Tennessee game where you can just let it rip, right? You don't want to come into that Tennessee game where you're like, hey, we went 1-2, and the Tennessee game feels like, oh God, we need this, right? You want to play with desperation regardless, but can you break it up in that way? I mean, obviously you want to take it one game at a time, but when we look at it and we talk about it, can you go 3-1 here? And what that looks like over the next 4 games. And then with those 2 being out of conference, you could throw Missouri in there too if you want. And over this 5-game stretch, can you go 4-1 in that stretch? And then however that looks, you probably want the wins to be the Big Ten wins. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. But certainly it's a do your work early situation, taking care of Arkansas on Thanksgiving Day.
Is that John Tanji on Wisconsin or Johnny Davis?
What's crazy is Tanji, I watched him at Colorado State because I got a lot of buddies and one of my old coaches on staff there. I mean, he shot in his highest amount of free throws taken per game was, I think, his junior year at Colorado State or sophomore year, where it was like 3.2 free throws a game. And then now he's at like 9. So he's always been super aggressive. But I don't know. I think we're going to see water finding its level a little bit with Tanji. You know how it is in Big Ten play. You go to these tournaments, it's a one-day scout. You're playing, game on one night, game the next day. I mean, guys are just kind of like, here's personnel, here's who they are, here are the matchups. You get to Big Ten play. I mean, there's teams that are going to be really scheming up and Illinois included, because they're going to be coming to Champaign and they're going to have something for them. I don't know what it's going to be, but they're going to have something for them. So to answer your question, I don't know. I mean, with how Johnny Davis's career panned out, it's like, do you want that comparison now? I don't know.
You take him for a year in Madison. I know that.
No question.
Know, man. Every year I want to doubt Greg Gard and what they look like on paper, and it's still very, very early. But man, it's been impressive to do what they did against Arizona, and then to win that little tournament they were in here recently. So,
well, how about Kamari McGee? I mean, This is a guy that transferred from Green Bay, and when he came in, you're kind of like, I played in the Horizon League, and I follow the Horizon League a little bit. I'm like, really? I mean, okay, I guess it's like guard depth, and he's come out this year shooting 55% from 3. He's taking good ones. He's smart, takes care of the ball. And then Blackwell's kind of taking a step forward. I've always liked Max Klesmit. It's a really good core in that backcourt, and they just constant movement, the ball screen continuity. I mean, they're tough to guard. And Kral's still there, who's smart, makes the right decisions. He's 7 feet tall, can step out. I don't know why we do this every single time. I said this with Northwestern as well, but familiarity coming back for Wisconsin, probably addition by subtraction with Storr in some areas. And everybody's like, I don't know. But then with Purdue, it's like, hey, there's some familiarity. They're first in the conference. So I don't know. I don't know how all that works.
That's fair. That's fair. One more question before I let you go. Back to Arkansas real quick. I should have mentioned this. Jonas Adu's been out the last couple of games for them, a transfer out of Tennessee at center that's a really good defender and has been a good player in the SEC. Trayvon Brazil made a return last night, I know, against Eastern Shore. He had been out as well against Little Rock when Arkansas was playing late last week. What factor do you think that would play based on whether Adu's in that front court mix against Tommy? I know that Big Z versus him is what everybody wants to see, but how do you think that plays out? Obviously, we don't know the statuses, but what's at stake there if he does play or doesn't play?
Yeah, well, what was interesting in the beginning of the season with Arkansas was they were playing Big Z at the 5, and they were just making him like a drop coverage guy. They were trying to like post him a little bit. They didn't do a ton of pick and pop with him. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, when Adu gets healthy, why not just play? If that's what you're going to do with Big Z, you might as well just play Adu because he's a better defender. And, he's probably a better, he's definitely not a better offensive player, but he's better probably as an offensive rebounder. So I'm like, if that's just how you're going to play, why don't you just play him? And now I think they've changed the way they've played. They're getting Big Z involved more. And I wonder what that means for Adu. Like, Adu's probably going to be in a secondary role, but just as we're talking about Merez Johnson and Tomislav, they might be having the same conversations about Adu and Big Z. And like, hey, can we play this tandem big lineup? And I think they can. I think Big Z can step out and can play on the perimeter. He's shown that at least in spurts. So that'll be really interesting to see. And look, he's been injured and they've still been a really good defensive team. And Adu coming back would only bolster their defensive profile in my mind. So yeah, it's something to be aware of for sure. And I'd be curious to see how Brad Underwood combats that if they do go to that big lineup.
For sure. Mike LaTulip, great stuff as always. You on the after darks this week at all? Post game? What you got?
1 a.m. after Maui tonight.
Oh, there you go.
John Fanta, and I think Goodman's going to be on there as well. So I gotta start watching games here at some point and making sure I know what the hell I'm talking about.
Let's get you off here. Well, we appreciate you as always. Enjoy Thanksgiving. We'll talk soon, man.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, everybody out there, we'll be back on Thursday. Jeremy Warner in Kansas City to cover that one. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. In the meantime, follow us, rate us, review us. Everybody take care of each other. That's all the spiel that Jeremy does. I think I nailed that, but enjoy your Thanksgiving. And we got hoops coming up here in a few days. So we'll talk to you soon here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.